been a little over a week now since the mini expansion for Resurgent Legends came out, and with some of the new cards that came in Resurgent Legends mini expansion, an old Shadow archetype has been revived and has been making waves throughout the competitive scene and on the ladder. It's called Midrange Shadow. Today I'm going to go over my take on the deck. I took it to Igni's Creator Cup about a week ago. Didn't get to show it off, but I'd still like to go over the deck as I feel it's pretty strong and it's not getting enough credit where credit is due. Let's get into it. Starting things off with my one drops, I have one copy of Spectral Sorceress. On Fanfare, summon a ghost, and whenever your allied follower is banished, gain one shadow. It's a 0/1. I play 3 copies of it. You run it in the deck because you want to build up your shadows in this deck. And when your ghost gets banished, they're not adding to your shadow count. So sticking a Special Sorceress turn 1 is just a lot of value throughout the game, especially considering how many ghost generators are actually in the deck. The next one drop I have is 2 copies of Night Terrors. Night Terrors is a 1 cost. Give -0, -5 to a follower, and you draw 2 cards. You use this to draw into your pieces, as this is a very combo-centric deck. Next up, I have 3 copies of Hellfire Strike. You deal 2 to the enemy leader, and then Necromancy 4, you deal 2 to all enemy followers as well. It's great for closing games, clearing boards, and the Necromancy is really important, and I'll get into why later when we cover one of the other cards. Next and last of the 1 drops, I have 3 copies of Haunted Mansion. Count down 3, and whenever an enemy follower is banished, you gain 1 shadow. At the end of turn, you put a ghost into your hand. This is your best turn 1 play, as not only do you get a ghost for next turn, but just like Spectral Sorceress, you're gaining shadows whenever your ghosts are banished or your other cards are banished. And like I said earlier, you need to build up your shadow count. Getting into the 2 drops, I have 2 copies of Mikhail. Invocation at the start of turn. Rally 10, you invoke this card, which means you play the card out of your deck and restore 2 defense to your leader, and he has Rush. Mikhail is in there as part of a small neutral package, as well as being able to pull him out of the deck and heal yourself later on in the game is really helpful. Now, if you play Shadowverse, you know Mikhail actually invokes himself to your hand, so on turn 2, he serves as a 3/1 rush to clear off bodies that your opponent have played out and you need to clear. Next up, I have 2 copies of Slayer of the Dead. On Fanfare, if any other followers are in play, destroy 1, summon a ghost, and draw a card. Necromancy 4, gain the ability to evolve for 0 evolution points. So on Fanfare, you trade out one of your followers that have served their purpose, and you get a ghost for extra storm damage and a draw. Now on Evolve, he becomes a 4/4 and does the same thing that his Fanfare does. Destroy an allied follower, summon a ghost, and draw a card. So that's 2 storm damage and 2 draws if you have Necromancy 4 or you just have a spare evolution point. Next up, we have 2 copies of Viscaria Abyssal Avenger. He's Bane 2/2 on Fanfare. If you have spent at least 10 shadows to perform Necromancy this match, evolve this follower. If you spent at least 20, deal 4 to the enemy leader and restore 4 defense to your lead. So this is where using the shadows for Slayer of the Dead and Hellfire Strike comes in handy. You want to use at least 10, that way when you play Viscaria, she automatically evolves. And then if you use 20, you deal 4 and heal 4. Now on Evolution, she becomes a 4/4, still maintains her Bane, and when she evolves, she destroys a random enemy follower and draws a card. It's great random removal, and when she evolves, you can Bane trade into another thing. So for 2 costs, you're removing 2 bodies and drawing a card, and potentially healing 4 and gaining 4. Last of the 2 costs, we have Ghastly Banishment. For 2 costs, it summons 2 ghosts. But in hand 7, it summons 2 ghosts And at the start of your opponent's next turn, you deal X to all enemies. X equals half of the number of allied followers banished this match, rounded up. So here's the ghost payoff, and if you're familiar with the ghost archetype from not too long ago, this was one of the game closers, as summoning ghosts throughout the game is really easy, and racking up your ghost count is relatively simple. You play this early game to summon 2 ghosts to get some chip damage in, or you play it on turn 7 or later to dome the opponent over the top for 5, 6, sometimes 10 damage. Next up, for 3 drops, I have 3 copies of Lucius, Traveler Trainer. He's a Bane 3/3, and Fanfare. Since we're playing Shadowcraft, he summons 2 ghosts, which increases your ghost count. And then on evolve, he maintains his Bane, and depending on what you're playing against, he becomes a 5/5 Bane with an on evolve effect. Your opponent's leader is forced or ruined, you recover 2 play points. If it's Shadow or Portal, you summon 2 ancient artifacts. And if it's Sword or Dragon, destroy an enemy amulet. And if it's Blood or Haven, you deal 4 to the enemy leader. So not only is he summoning ghosts to advance your ghost count, he's a 5/5 Bane that can run over smaller things or Bane trade into some of the bigger problem units. Next up, I have 2 copies of Asuka and Shiori Twins. Fanfare, draw 2 cards, and if you have more evolution points than your opponent, you restore 2 defense and you recover 8 points. So it's really all about the twins. You play them down as a 1 cost, 1/1 that draws you 2 and heals you 2. Or you can play them as a 3 cost to draw 2 cards if you're struggling to find something to do on turn 3. If you play them in the later stages of the game, you're more likely to have more evo points than your opponent because you have so many things that have free ways to evolve that you are not so heavily reliant on your evolution points. So you're more likely to get your heal, draw, and cost reduction. Next up, as part of the neutral package, we have Goddess of Compassion. She's a 3 cost 3/3 with fusion, meaning you can fuse any spells, amulets, or neutral followers with her. If you fuse 2 cards with it, you fuse her into a Goddess of Condemnation. On Fanfare, if this card is fused with at least 1 card and you have more evolution points than your opponent, you ramp 1, so you gain an empty play point. So on turn 4, you're going second and you have the ability to evolve before your opponent. Gives you a great way to ramp up into your later game cards while still being a body that your opponent has to deal with. On evolve, becomes a 5/5 and gives -2/2 to all enemy followers. Not only does it function as ramp, it functions as removal as well. You're going second, it's something that your opponent has to deal with, and it can swing tempo in your favor by clearing your opponent's board. And last of our 3 drops, we have 3 copies of Chronos Time Turner. On Fanfare, if this is your 10th turn or later, you recover all your play points and evolution points. And on Evolve, you give the enemy leader the following effect. You start a turn, they lose 1 play point for it. Then they lose that effect. Then, or if this is the 10th turn or later, you lose 3 instead. Now, Kronos has a lot of hate behind him, and that's because he's very frustrating to play against. When you play him down on turn 4, going second, and you evolve and lock your opponent at 4 play points, limiting their game plan while still being able to, next turn, continue what your game plan is doing. It's a very powerful card, and during the later stages of the game, the recover all play points is a big boom. If this is your 10th turn and you have 10 play points, you can play Ghastly Banishment, and you can play Chronos to recover your play points and play another Ghastly Banishment, doubling the damage that Ghastly Banishment is going to deal. Next up in the deck, we have 3 copies of Odile, Ebony, and Dancer. Crystallize 2, Countdown 2, she becomes a 2-drop artifact that, with last words, summon Odile, Ebony Dancer. This is one of your better turn 2 plays because on turn 4, she'll spawn as a 4/4 body that your opponent has to deal with. Or you can also hard play her as a 5 cost. She summons Odette, Ivory Dancer, which is also another 4/4. So for 5 costs, you spit out 2 bodies, both with last words effects. One is to deal 2 to your opponent or to all enemies, and the other is to heal 2 to all allies. They both have the end of turn effect when they're evolved. That is the same as their last words effect. So Odile will deal 2 at end of turn to all enemies, and Odette will heal 2 to all allies. Next up, I have 2 copies of Soul Extraction for 5 cost. It summons 5 ghosts. But with Necromancy 5, you give them all Bane. You can use this as board clear, base damage, or you can use this as a way to spend your shadows for Necromancy to further along your Viscaria. Next up, the reason why this deck exists is because Zebit Spreading Corruption is such a powerful card. At 3 copies, she's a 6 cost 4/4 that summons 2 of the following cards: Ravening Beetle, Ruthless Mantis, or Reeling Shuttlefly. If you play her for her enhanced cost, she gains Ward, recovers 2 evolution points, and the next time she takes damage, it's reduced to 0. On Evolve, she does the same thing and summons 2 of her insect minions. So, on Fanfare and on Evolve, you're summoning 2 of 3 options. A 2/2 Storm, that last word deals 2. A 3/1 with Rush, that last words restores 3 to your leader. Or a 1/3 that end of turn you draw a card, and Necromancy 6 gives -2/-2 to all enemy followers, and it has Bane. Generally, you're going to want to summon multiple copies of Shutterfly because you want to not only draw but use your Necromancy to control your enemy's board and spend shadows for Viscaria. But the 2/2 Storm with last words deal 2 means this is 4 damage for 1 body, or the 3/1 if you need the emergency light if your opponent has control of the game. And lastly, as part of the neutral package, protect in 2 copies of Odin, Advent of Ragnarok. Accelerate 4, banish 2 random enemy followers and all ally followers. You put a copy of Odin back into your hand and subtract X from its cost, with X being the number of followers that banished. The reason why I put Odin in the deck was not only does he banish some problem things that you either don't want to proc their last words, such as Alice, he also gets rid of bigger bodies such as Zale and Joe, which can be a little rough to beat over with pure numbers because a lot of the cards in this deck have very small amounts of power. But also, by banishing some of your followers, he's adding to your Ghastly Banishment count, because Ghastly Banishment just checks for the number of cards banished. They don't always have to be ghosts. So, serving a double purpose as removal and increasing your banish count, while still giving you a 4/3 with Storm that on Fanfare banishes it. And more often than not, it'll be no more than 5 costs to play because of his cost reduction effect. So that's my take on the mid-range Shadow deck that I took to Ignis Creator Cup. I'll be streaming matches with this deck once I return from my trip. That way I can better showcase this deck and some of my choices. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, show your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.